Hey, college sports fans, we are here to continue previewing the Clemson season for football, of course, and we're doing this position by position. And today we are getting into the safeties. The coaching staff, Dabo Sweeney, new defensive coordinator Tom Allen, they got some work to do to figure out who to line up around Khalil Barnes. And as we've been doing in this series, we will look at the best ever to line up at safety for Clemson. Boy, who could possibly belong at the top of that list? I'm Bill Zimmerman. This is the Reign Supreme Alway Podcast, Season 4.
I'm Daniel Shirley. I think there's one answer, right? I mean, there's some other good ones as well, but there's one who I think we know will be at the top of that list.
It sure seems like it to me. And I think a lot of the position groups for 2025 have been more clear cut. Safety is one where there's, I think, a lot more up in the air. And kind of like you talked about, we were texting, you're like, hey, you got to mix in nickel with linebacker and safety. And how does that all fit together? There's going to be a lot of moving pieces, and we'll get into that during this episode. First, we're going to get into the best of all time. I will try to put this as quickly as I can because we've said it in other episodes, but kind of two groups, right? We're going to have kind of like the almost the best of, and then we're going to have the best of. So it's in this case, it's kind of a group of six and a power four today for the safety position, and sometimes Daniel, you bring in a few extra names as well. But let's get started. With a couple of guys who I always enjoyed rooting for, and that is Kayvon Wallace and Antoine Edwards. And you and I kind of went back and forth on Edwards maybe being in that final, that power four, that top tier.
Yeah, I think see like, what did Kayvon Wallace mean to this team, right? When he played and won two national titles. He's in that group.
Yeah.
There's some of those guys that won two national titles. There's not many of them, but he's certainly in that group. And I think that what he was able to do, kind of hybrid safety nickel, snuck in, played some linebacker a little bit. He was in that toolbox for Brent Venables that we've talked about with some other players. So, maybe not as much as a true safety as some of these other guys, like a DeAndre McDaniel, some of these other guys, but Robert O'Neill. But there's some names there that remember Michael Hamlin, who was a really good safety. Rashard Hall, who had a good career with the Tigers. So, but the thing about Kayvon was he was a winner and a
Yeah.
playmaker.
Yeah.
And, again, is he in the top tier? Because we'll get into that top tier. No, probably not. But that's not a shot. We're talking about more than 100 years of Clemson football, and you're on this list. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the versatility because we talked during the linebackers episode of we wondered where does Isaiah Simmons really fit, and we chose
Right.
linebacker, but he could have worked at safety. Well, one of the reasons that Isaiah Simmons was able to put his versatility on display is because Kayvon Wallace had that very similar versatility, different frame, different places that he worked, but he certainly allowed Brent Venables to kind of be a bit of a mad scientist back there. Well, there was a much, much lesser coordinator we called the mad scientist. So maybe I shouldn't use that term, but Brent Venables was able to get really creative with that back seven in a lot of times. And absolutely 2017, 2018, the defensive line earned a lot of the credit for what happened, but a lot of the reasons they could do what they did is that back seven was able to create so much confusion. And it wasn't just Simmons who was a part of that, it was Wallace who could move around to complement Simmons as well. And hold his own and just made some big plays. Be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. It's free. It's the best place to catch all our episodes, and it's the best place for you to comment with your reactions. Antoine Edwards went on to a heck of an NFL career, a first round draft pick. Maybe wasn't a standout like the guy atop the two guys. In fact, I would say atop this list were very much standouts as NFL safeties. And we don't think much about NFL with all this. Edwards was a little bit more of a ball hawk type of guy and showed that athletic ability when he was in the kick return game as well. Amassed all kind of yardage with the ball. So again, I just enjoyed watching him play. I remember that visor, and just not a lot of guys were wearing the visor like that back then. First round draft pick, as I mentioned, 219 tackles, 8 interceptions, 35 pass breakups, but 1,169 return yards, and he just brought a heck of a vibe to that defense.
He did. He was a fun player. He wore number one. I mean, he just looks, he looks sleek on the field, right?
Yeah,
And especially when they wore the all whites and, that number one was out there and you knew he was going to make a play. So again, I think and we'll talk some about this year's group too. That's the key with safeties is you need them to make plays. And, I don't know that any position on defense is more about being a playmaker than safety, right? We talk about playmakers. Obviously, you think wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, but on defense, it's kind of about the safety. And I know other guys make plays, but you really need those safeties to make plays. And when Clemson's had a great defense, it's typically had some good guys at the back of that secondary.
for sure. Let's mention Kayvon Wallace's numbers too, just to catch up on that. 178 tackles, including 81 in his senior season, 21 pass breakups, 5 interceptions, 36 starts in 59 games, and of course that interception in 2018 when Texas A&M was trying to get a 2-point attempt in the closing moments of the game. It helped Clemson really preserve that win. It was a big day for him. He had 7 tackles and 2 pass breakups that day. And then you mentioned Robert O'Neill, a guy who was a force on the field when you and I were on campus. We were able to watch quite a bit of him. 8 interceptions as a freshman in 1989. He finished his career with 12 total, 37 pass breakups, and 3 times an All ACC guy.
Yeah, it's a good player, right? I mean, and the thing about that is he played on some really good defenses.
Yeah,
Even with the transition from Danny Ford to Ken Hatfield, and maybe the offense wasn't quite up to snuff. The defense was still pretty good and kept them in some games. So he was a great player, fun to watch. I remember that, and Bill, remember that freshman year, like you said, it was one of the best freshmen in the country. I
yeah.
don't care what position we were talking about, and maybe it took a little bit of a dip after that, and was hard to live up to that. Maybe hard to expect a guy to have 8 more interceptions each year after that because that's hard to do. But man, that freshman year he was outstanding.
Yeah, and it's quite a transition from a very aggressive defensive coordinator who actually was DB's coach back then, Bill Oliver, and then you bring in Ron Dickerson, who was more of a scheme kind of guy and very smart football coach, but it was just I never thought it was quite the right fit with a bunch of really attacking players like O'Neal, like Kirkland, like McLaughlin, like so many guys across that field really wanted to be out there and attacking, and it was a very much read and react scheme and a very good scheme and a lot of stops. Just he couldn't in a transfer portal era, he probably could have turned over the roster and brought in the guys that he needed and made it a fit. It just didn't quite work out. I also want to, you mentioned Michael Hamlin, '05 to '08. He was one of 5 players in Clemson history with a 3 interception game. He finished with 14 total for his career. So another ball hawk type of guy back there. That's tied for 4th all time on the list of interceptions at Clemson. 43 career starts. That also tops all Clemson safeties. 181 career tackles. So he's another guy who could have been on that list. And let's go way back also to Jackie Calvert, 48 to 50, a first team All American on 2 undefeated teams, right? So the 48 team that went undefeated and won the Gator Bowl, and then a captain on the 1950 team, finished 10th, became Clemson's first top 10 team. And he also rushed. He carried the ball for 5.92 rushing yards per attempt. That was a school record as late as 2011 when he passed away. He read that in his obituary. So the late Jackie Calvert certainly made a mark on the Clemson football historical record. Even though he finally we've got a guy that played before our era, right? So we're too young to remember somebody, which is to remember him on the field at least. And then the last name on that list of 6, Rashard Hall, a guy who came back to Clemson and made a mark with Paul Journey and in the athletic front office after his
Yep.
playing days were over. Another 14 interception guy, played from 2009 to 12, so another guy who's tied for 4th all time, and certainly again memorable play, even though kind of like you talked about with one of the other guys, not exactly the hallmark of Clemson football as far as spending. Where were they ranked? What were their records?
Yeah, it's a good group, right? I mean, there's no doubt that it's a good group, and again, I love that group that we've talked about, and we're going to get into a couple of guys here, and I said one at the top, like you said, it might be 2. We're
Yeah.
going to get a couple of guys here who are in my favorite Clemson group ever. I mean, these 2 guys, one I grew up on, One was more after we got out of school, started, right after we got out of school, and came along after that, and both had great pro careers too. I know this isn't part of that, but that you look at what they did in the NFL just kind of solidified what they did at Clemson.
Yep. And let's go ahead. Another guy who came back to campus, the name you mentioned earlier, DeAndre McDaniel. A little bit of overlap there with Rashard Hall for a couple of years. He played '07 to 10, 296 tackles. You start seeing some of these tackle numbers rise when you get into these upper groups. 15 interceptions. So again, up there in the top five, that would be third all time or tied for third all time. I don't have it written down here, do I? 20 pass breakups and then a first team All-American. Uh, just you're glad to see him, back in the coaching ranks, and he just I remember him kind of carrying that back four. And of course, there were other guys out there very, very talented, but he was kind of that anchor back there, wasn't he?
He was, and I don't think we'll ever forget that pick against Florida State where he
Mm,
ran over the quarterback, pointed at the quarterback, and ran over him. Just one of those guys. Again, Bill, we've kind of talked about those guys in that early group of Dabo being the head coach, that early tenure of him being the head coach, that those guys turned the program around and what it meant to be Clemson football again. And he's definitely in that mix with some of the earliest guys of Dabo's tenure as the head coach, where they could beat Florida State right before they couldn't beat Florida State, or they could, you know, climb in the standings and climb in the rankings and all those things. And DeAndre certainly had a piece of that. There's no doubt about that.
without question, I agree. Connect with us on social media. That's at Clemson Kickoff. Whether you're on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, or Facebook, you'll find us there. And then you get into Robert Carswell, uh, 97 to 2000. So again, kind of not that greatest era of Clemson stature as far as win-loss record and rankings. But the more research I did on this guy, I'm like, Daniel, this guy's got to be in the top group. 374 tackles. That's 10th all time, right? He's a safety. Bubba Brown, the linebacker, I think it was 515 as the Clemson record for tackles. For a safety to be that close, that's pretty impressive. So, leader among safeties that I was able to unearth: 7 interceptions, 21 tackles for loss. And again, maybe because of when he played, he's another one of those guys where it's not that big a name, because not a lot of attention was back there. But I'll tell you what, he certainly, I remember him being a presence on the field every possession.
Well, and you convinced me to put him in the top four. I mean, and I wasn't anti against him
Right.
being in top four. I didn't remember the numbers being that big and that that powerful, and that certainly is part of the puzzle. But you always remember him wearing that number 9, right? And I can just see him on the field for the Tigers. So just a great player, and absolutely deserves to be in that top tier.
Yeah. And then I know you'll have a lot to say about Terry Kinard. I always liked watching him. Remember, I still, whenever I see his name, I hear Pat Summerall saying it on NFL broadcasts because the Giants were on so many weeks on that national CBS game that would go to everybody. He played from 78 to 82, part of that first national championship team in the 1981 season. He had 294 tackles for his career. He had 17 interceptions and a unanimous All-American. So just career interception leader, career takeaways leader with 19 total, and he is in the Clemson Ring of Honor, and that will put anybody on this list. But certainly, Kinard belongs there. Just his body of work as a player speaks for itself.
Well, and I remember him as kind of the face of the defense, right? Of alongside Jeff Davis and a couple other guys, but that first championship defense, I mean, that was kind of about Terry Kennard and Jeff Davis and those guys. And you know, just a great player, a fun player to watch. I mean, I'm 9, 10, 11, 12 years old at that time. So, maybe you romanticize it a little bit, but man, he was an all-time great at Clemson. Like, and as you've pointed out, if you're in the Ring of Honor, you're on this list. And you don't get into the Ring of Honor for grins and giggles. I mean, you get in the Ring of Honor because you've earned it. and he was terrific. And I don't think they win a national title without him, playing safety. So, just what he meant to this team, what he meant to this program. Then like you said, he went on, had a really good career with the Giants, but just a force in that defensive backfield.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I mean, I was very young when I was at that 1981 national championship game in Miami on January 1st in 1982 at the Orange Bowl. But I just remembered his name coming out of the speakers, often. And I can't go back, and I don't have time to, with all the research we've been doing this, I can't sit there and watch a national championship game and figure out, just how much he played. But that was just a name that stuck in my head. And then when Clemson finally was on national television a little more the next year, and I think the Georgia game was a big one in '82 for the
Yeah.
'82 season, and you heard his name there, and I got to know a little more about him. But again, just a standout presence back there, and another standout presence. Oh my goodness, sometimes called Weapon X, and that's Brian Dawkins. 247 tackles, 11 interceptions, three-time All ACC, and he is the only Clemson Tiger in the NFL Hall of Fame. Certainly worth mentioning here. But Dawkins, just like you said, he's that era of right after we left campus. I was able to come back to campus for a few games because I was working in North Carolina back then. It was a nice trip down, reconnect with friends. But man, Dawkins just, uh, you could tell, wow, they've got another good one back there after having just lost one of the really good ones in Robert O'Neill. And he did turn out to be, again, I'll use that term again, that anchor of that back four. And it really, truly, at that point, was a back four back then.
Yeah, and Bill, I don't know that we appreciate how great he was at Clemson, right? Because he went on to, I think he was probably even a better player than he was at Clemson, but he played on some kind of ugly teams, maybe some bad teams, however you want to describe that when he was at Clemson. But you go back and look at the highlights, man, he's all over the field. He is flying all over the place. He's making tackles. I mean, all those hits you've seen with the Eagles, where you see the video clips and you go, my goodness, how is this even legal? And he did the same thing at Clemson.
Yeah.
So he was a great player in the NFL. We know that, but he was a great player for the Tigers. Again, didn't played on some pretty, poor teams and some teams that struggled comparatively speaking, right, to the rest of the history of the program. But it wasn't because of him. He was a great player.
Without a doubt, made his mark. And you, you look at this list, and not a lot of these guys, you would think they would all go on to like big time NFL careers. And there's some guys we'll talk about with cornerbacks who have fared better. None as well as Dawkins and Kinard, I would say, on this list. And it's a little bit unusual, but again, this is about the college game. But to see Dawkins do what he did in the NFL, like it was such a uh, wonderful thing to me to see him, see those skills translate, see him excel and represent Clemson the way he did, and the Eagles being pretty high profile during his career certainly helped push the Tigers out there as a blue blood program, or at least a program that could become blue blood, and it certainly has since then. Hey, check out our website, clemsonkickoff.com. It's got kickoff times, it's got archives of episodes and blogs, some offers. It's a simple resource for you. We will see what this year's safeties can do to help cement Clemson's blue blood status, which I think it has now. I think you'll get argument from outside the Southeast about that, and even in some pockets of the Southeast about where Clemson stands. But the safeties room does have a lot of work to do. There is one standout in Khalil Barnes. He bounced back late last season from maybe an early season mini sophomore slump of sorts, learning different positions. You wonder if he can kind of become that versatile piece, kind of like Kayvon Wallace was, and we talked about that. Maybe not to the same extent, but because of the needs that are going to be around him. But Barnes is just a big play guy, and I wouldn't even go so far as to call him a ball hawk necessarily, but a big play guy, and he just makes his presence felt in so many ways, and you want to see him kind of become again that sort of leader back there, as well as just someone who makes an impact here and there. You'd also like to see him reduce the number of times he gets burned, but part of that is just the nature of being a defensive back.
Yeah, Bill, I go back to the South Carolina game a couple years ago where he's kind of struggled and I don't know that that was all on him. We can talk scheme and the guys around him all day long, I think. But I like him. I like him a lot. Again, it goes back to playmaker, right? And that's what we've talked about with a lot of these guys is if they are playmakers, they can help this defense. I think he's one of the focal points of this defense this year. I know that Clemson has a new defense coordinator. We'll see how that works. There's other good pieces around him, but I think if you start listing kind of the keys to the defense as far as the players, it's not going to take long before you get to his name. There's other guys, and we'll talk about them, and we have talked about them on some other episodes. But I think he is absolutely uh, one of the keys to this defense this year.
Yeah, and I would be fine with him playing safety this year. I think he adapted back there toward the end of the season. I'd be fine seeing him at nickel if that's where he fits the best. And you may see some situational moving about. We'll see. Early in the season, he may stay in one spot. I mean, just under the new scheme with Tom Allen, but Tom Allen's got to find his quote tiger position guy, right? He's got to figure out who he wants to use there. He's got a lot of options. It could be Barnes. It could be Wade Woodaz moving there from linebacker at times. A few guys at safety that I think could be good there, and we'll just see what Tom Allen decides. Let's talk about some of the rest of the room and how things are going to fit in around. I think Colin Griffin probably has the most snaps of anybody who's back now that RJ Mickens has gone pro, and hopefully he's going to do great following his father's footsteps with a big NFL career. Colin Griffin, I would say I won't say sophomore slump, but I think he showed more, flashed more as a freshman, and he struggled last year as a sophomore. Like that development, I don't think it was a tremendous drop off to say, oh, sophomore slump. I just think the development wasn't there. Didn't really look a lot thicker or stronger, didn't seem to be hitting as well, did seem to try to be aggressive and maybe a little bit of that too much Tanner Muse trying to make the big hit, trying to make the big play too soon, too fast. One of the guys who I'd say maybe to an amateur like me looked like maybe the angles weren't quite right. And maybe you could say the same of a guy whose high school career you were familiar with in Ricardo Jones. Again, very capable, much like Griffin, both very adept back there. Who's going to be the one to emerge in this system from those two guys, or will they both emerge?
Yeah, I like Ricardo Jones a lot. Like you said, I saw him play in high school here in Middle Georgia. So I think that you saw Ricardo, I think, made some good contributions, mostly on special teams. Last year, there were big plays in special teams that he helped make, but I just remember him being on the blocking for the Adam Randall kickoff return at the end of the ACC championship game that set up the game-winning field goal. So I I really think I don't know that like Kylan Griffin, I don't know that he, as you said, I don't know it was a sophomore slump, but he didn't get better last year over his freshman year. And I think you want to see that improvement year over year. And that wasn't there last year. So can he kind of get the trajectory back in the right direction this year? I think that's what you're looking for. And like I said, I like Ricardo Jones a lot. I think he's going to have a good year. Um, Again, it's as you and I were kind of talking about a little bit as we were kind of prepping some other stuff. It's where do these pieces fit at safety, right? Who's the nickel back? Who's the strong safety? Who's the free safety? Where do those pieces fit? I think those are the things that I don't know that we know that just yet until the new uh, setup is in place with Tom Allen, right? I'm sure they've got a kind of an idea of where guys are going to fit, but I think for us until we start seeing practice reports, from some of the folks who are covering the team on a day-to-day basis, we're not going to know that answer until they get on the field against LSU. Oh,
Right.
well, look where he's playing at nickel, and look, he's playing free, and he's playing. So I think those are all kind of still kind of TBA.
For sure. And We can get into Ronan Hanafin as well, who converted last year over to safety. He had been recruited as a receiver, but there was during his recruitment, a lot of schools say, some were considering him as a receiver and as some were considering him as a safety. They've moved him over. I think he showed some glimpses of what can, make him a standout player as well. He might end up earning some starting spots, might end up spending some time at that Tiger spot. We also have the veteran Tyler Venables back. What's his nickname?
Oh, T-Bone.
There you
Yes.
go.
Right.
Yep, he's
Yeah.
back.
Sorry, I had a little bit of an old man moment there for a second.
We'll see. I don't know. He may be migrating into sort of that player coach kind of Paul Tyson kind of Hunter Johnson spot, but I would expect to see him out there on the field as well. And then Rob Billings was another guy we talked about last year, another guy out of North Georgia actually, as opposed to Middle Georgia. Uh, we didn't see as much of him as we thought we would. And then you got Noah Dixon, Colin Webb, and Joe Wilkinson also in the mix. So a lot of talent in the room. And then you've got true freshman Jakarian Keenan coming in, maybe a little more developmental, but there's certainly the opportunity for any of these guys to emerge and get out there on the field and maybe become the next sort of Nolan Turner, where you didn't expect him to become a multi-year starter the way he did and make the impact that he did at times. But let's see who pops loose. How are Mickey Kahn and Mike Reed and Tom Allen going to look at this and sort of piece it all together, as well as the rest of the assistants? Well, they've got fall camp to figure it out, and they need to get their best guys out there against LSU.
They do, and I can't wait to see what Hanafin looks like.
Yeah.
I think, Bill, I thought he had a good impact last year with really not much preparation time, right, in the offseason, because he's transitioning from wide receiver to safety, and what is he, and how are we going to use him, and we need him more at safety. He's had this whole offseason to prepare to be a safety. I think he's kind of one of those guys at the end of the year we might look back on and go, man, he was really good for this team. And he was, and maybe under the radar, unexpected, however you want to look at it. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can be. I can't wait to read some of the press, some of the practice reports this preseason to see what he's becoming.
Yeah. Would you say the guys who are going to get the most snaps are those four of Barnes, Griffin, Jones, and Hanafin?
I would think so. And moving them around and what are they and who's playing free safety this snap, who's playing nickel, who's playing strong, whatever. I think it's we've heard for a few years with Dabo and the offensive line. Well, we just got to get the best five out there, right? I think this is just going to be who's the best three for us, and like you said, maybe the best four. It's kind of a rotation. Who are those best four guys, and we'll fit them in wherever they fit.
Yeah, and maybe not so much of that situational substitution early in the season against LSU, but you may see that evolve as they move along, or they may see that there's a need that certain guys excel in certain roles and need work in other roles, so you may see more subbing back then. It's gonna be a mix and match kind of situation through fall camp, and I'm really eager to see what emerges because there's a lot of talent back there. It's just how best to deploy it and pair it up together. So we will continue this series with cornerbacks and get that. I think will put us through the entire defense. Then we'll transition over to the offense. We may or may not have already recorded all the offense positions. I don't know, but we will
Don't
see.
give away any secrets. Nobody wants to see how the sausage is made, right?
No, exactly. But we did not mention Ronan Hanafin in there, so thank goodness we had that. We got him here where he belongs this year. So
Right,
uh,
right.
we will keep this series going. Hope you're enjoying this mix of, hey, looking forward to the year ahead as well as looking back at some of the greats of all time. Until that next episode, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.